I think we're about ready to get started. We may have Jeanette jump on remotely, so we'll watch for her if she does. Mark, do you need to kick us off? Is that correct? I know that Christiane looks like she's loading some PowerPoints. Thank you all for organizing this. It looks like a great agenda and look forward to the conversation.
Yes, I'll go first, and then we'll start, I think, with Deanna, and then go to Christiane. So this is your last preliminary workshop this year that we've started. Hopefully, the ones that we've had so far have been helpful and given you some good information to be thinking about. We don't have any significant new information regarding the property tax or the levy, just because they're going through their protests right now and hearings, and we won't get a certified roll until late July. And then right after that, we'll be providing the recommended budget. So today, we turn our attention really to other major revenue sources, particularly on general fund and namely sales tax. You'll see it's much more modest growth that we've seen in the current year and I'm projecting for next year, but please ask questions about some of the projections we have. We also want to lay out some major cost drivers, particularly in the area of personnel. As you know, it's the largest part of our budget and drives a lot of our costs. And then I want to emphasize that all figures and proposals have not been fully vetted by CMO. We actually had our budget blitz last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so we haven't even begun to look at some of these proposals, including revenue proposals, so it's all very fresh and you're getting it in real time, again, so that you can take it all into consideration early. We had up to, over $100 million in new requests from departments, and that's so far. We're going to comb back through all of our notes from you all, from our one-on-ones, to make sure that we've captured those in some of the deliberations that we'll have before we bring you a balanced budget. And go back through and scrub and make sure that if the departments didn't ask for certain things that we feel like you all really wanted, we'll consider that for sure. And then finally, it's getting pretty clear, I think, that this budget will be tighter than the last 2 or 3. We'll spend the next 60 days putting together a balanced proposed budget as required by state law and city charter. And as we put the puzzle together, a lot will hit the cutting floor just because there's only so much we can afford within our current revenue streams. And of course, ultimately, you'll decide what's in the budget and what's not. And hopefully this is, again, these sessions have been helpful early and giving you real-time information so that you can then consider all of your alternatives. So we will, after today, we'll be back to you for a presentation of the proposed budget in mid-August. And then we'll go through a series of additional workshops, public comment, and so forth, leading up to adoption in September. So with that, unless there's any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Deanna, who will get us started.
So Deanna Giordano, Human Resources Director, and I'm going to talk about some of the major budget drivers and total compensation that we offer and provide to employees here in the city of Fort Worth. And so I'll first start off with just kind of what is total compensation, what does it include? We provide employees with a menu of robust options that kind of meet all of their individual needs as well as that of their dependents. And so that includes all of these different benefits that are listed there, but kind of the top of the total compensation package is pension. And pension is still a great benefit that the city of Fort Worth extends to all of our full-time employees. In addition to that, we have a medical program where we provide a medical program that's free for an employee only on the Consumer Choice Plan. In addition, we have a high deductible plan, and the city contributes $540 per individual and up to $1,000 where an individual has their family on their medical plan. We also provide a menu of options related to dental benefits. Basic life insurance is provided at cost to the city, so no cost to the individual unless they want to upgrade the benefit coverage. We also provide robust sick and vacation leave banks, as well as 9 paid holidays, 2 personal holidays, and a wellness program, which also includes an insurance premium discount for the medical plan that the individual elects, and then an employee assistance plan. And I want to just highlight just on the medical plan, this is all for general employees as well as police. I wanted to just note that fire administers their own health plan. So what does it mean to be fully insured, or self-insured? The city of Fort Worth is a self-insured provider, so we basically take on the risk and the financial responsibility of all of the claims that we experience within our health plan. And so we're responsible for paying all of the bills associated with that. We're responsible for all of the risk that might be associated with the health expenses of our employees. We do hire a third-party administrator, which basically processes all the bills on behalf of the city. But to be self-insured, it allows us to kind of shape our program to meet the needs of our individuals that are on, our members that are on the health plan. And so we look at data that looks at cost drivers or medical drivers so that we can shape the plan to meet their needs. We also have stop-loss coverage, and that's basically supplemental insurance for claims that will exceed $1 million. And so I'll tell you, just in the last 2 years, in 2023, we had 3 claims that exceeded that $1 million expense. This year, we have 2 claims that will hit or exceed that $1 million expense, and one that's even nearing $2 million. So as we are self-insured, we have to monitor all of that data and aggregate it and make business decisions or even plan design changes to make sure that we are trying to contain costs. Here's just a group fund overview for the last few years and what we're proposing for fiscal year '25. So we are proposing a 5% increase on city contributions. So that's comparable to what we did in fiscal year '24 as well as in fiscal year '23. The employees saw a premium increase in 2023, and that was the first time since 2018. And so basically, their planned elections of what they purchased on the medical plan side, they didn't see an increase for a significant number of years. That increase did occur in 2023. In 2021, kind of as a result of kind of the COVID dip where individuals weren't seeking coverage, we had 2 premium holidays, and so we were collecting more premiums than we were paying out in expenses. And this is a benefit of being self-insured because you're able to kind of have those modifications and changes. We've also added just 4 different point solutions to make sure that we can address the needs of our members that are on our health plan. And just so that you know, we have over 9,952 belly buttons on our plan. So this is not just employees, but their spouses, their dependents, and all of those individuals kind of make up the medical plan for the city. Here's what our claims cost has been experiencing. And so there's kind of, when you go into, starting in 2019, we made some significant changes, but we saw the same dip that every other organization saw as it relates to medical health claims in 2020. And so that was the COVID year, and you'll see kind of coming out of COVID in 2021 and 2022, we start to spike. And then the numbers increase very significantly in 2024. And some of what we're seeing is delayed care. And so individuals didn't seek medical treatment even coming out of COVID. There was still some hesitation in 21 and 22. And some of that delayed care or late detection of issues or concerns is driving up some of the cost. Again, 3 claims in excess of $1 million in '23. We're seeing complex medical conditions. We're seeing inflation cost, and even just the medical industry as well is what you're hearing kind of in every other industry. And then we are seeing cost drivers on the medical prescription side, and these are the GLP-1 prescriptions for weight management. You've all heard it, Ozempic, Wegovy, all of those different GLP-1s. Since they're fairly new, it's trending, and they're trending higher, and they're very expensive. We do hope that it has a long-term effect, that individuals that are able to manage those weights, that their weight, are going to have not have those significant issues that come as a result of it. So overall increase in treatment costs. So we're seeing the same that you're seeing across all industries in our health plan as well. Here's the health fund proposal. Again, we're asking the city to contribute an increased 5% in city contributions for the employee health plan. That's $2.7 million for a total of $62.9 million that's in the budget. We're asking for employee premium contributions of a comparable amount. It's much less, so $474,000, spread that across those employees that elect to take our plan. Here's how it kind of breaks down. We still have the consumer choice plan that's free to employees. So if it's just an employee only, they get that at no cost to them. If they're looking at the health center plan, employee only, the increase is $332 a month. And that gets even smaller when you start to break it across 26 pay periods. For employee and family on the health center plan, which is our most expensive plan, the increase per month is $23, and that actually turns out to be about $10 and some change per pay period for employees and family on that health center plan. The consumer choice plan is $16.72 per month, and so you'll see the increases for both the city and the employer across all of those different funds and how those contributions are allocated. Here's just an overview of pension contributions, and so I share this because the pension is a significant portion of contributions and budget drivers by the city. The general employees in Group 1 and 2, as well as fire employees, the city contribution based on their average, on their salary, is 26.64%. The employees contribute at varying rates from 10.95 for that Group 2, 11.65 for Group 1, and then fire contributes at 13.65. Police is contributing at a higher rate. They have a richer benefit, if you will, as it relates to pension. City contribution is over 27%, and then employees are 14.73. I'll share this, these are the contributions that we experience here in the city. We don't contribute to Social Security, so there's a little bit of an offset as you would see in other employing organizations. But I want to share with you just what does the total compensation look like. On average, our employees, general employees, make about $65,000 a year. So if we look at $65,000 and then add in some of the other benefits that we budget and account for, the Healthy Challenge incentive is a $250 benefit that we can award to employees. Medical insurance, I'm looking at the most popular plan, the health center plan for employee and family, that's over $19,000 that's allocated in the city's budget. Holidays, $2,750. Paid vacation days, $3,750. Paid sick leave, 10 days per year, it's $2,500. Of course, the city contribution to the pension is over $17,000. The basic life, which again we provide at no expense to the city, is $60, and then the employee assistance program at $23. And so it gives you kind of a total compensation for an individual making $65,000. The total rewards package, and this doesn't include sick leave or holidays, it's $106,000. So it's something that we share with our employees. It's available for them to see. Not everybody sees all of the benefit or cost that comes associated with their position. They just see what they take home. And so we have to make sure that this is available to them just so they can see the total package and the total compensation for employees. As we look at just what does that look like, you heard Mark say it's one of the biggest expenses to the city. This is the total personnel budget when you look at base pay, benefits, and pension. And it's $888 million proposed for fiscal year '25. It's 70% of the general fund budget. And so these are just information that we kind of keep at the forefront, and we work in partnership with Fort Worth Lab because every decision that we make on the HR side has a huge financial impact on the budget side, and so we have to stay in partnership with those with that department. Questions on benefits or total compensation?
Questions from council for Deanna and Macy?
Just one clarifying question. What is the difference between Group Employees 1 and Group Employees 2?
It's their hire date, and so it's individuals. There were significant pension changes that were made, and I want to say in '09, and I'm looking to my team to validate that. In '09, there was pension changes that were made, and so that's where the Group 1 and Group 2 were created. Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Bivens?
Deanna, great presentation. I have a question for you, but there's no urgency today to answer. But on the slide where you show the 2024 compensation, I think you said the average salary is like $65,000.
Yes.
At some point, can you give us the demographics of that breakdown? Because when I hear we have city employees who at the hourly wage are way below that, be interesting to see where the money is going.
Okay.
And demographics to include education, ethnicity, sex, age, what have you.
Okay.
Jared?
Thank you, Deanna, for this presentation. It's very helpful. On the slide with the health fund proposal, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. For the employee plus family, the health center plan for an employee to have insurance with their family included is $789. Does that include children and spouse, or is that
Yes.
children only? Or
It's children and spouse. And so that could be one child, two children, three children, et cetera.
Right, and then just help me clarify the difference between health center plan and consumer choice plan, because I see that's 574 in that
Yeah.
same category.
The consumer choice plan would be considered a high deductible plan. And so you have a upfront expenses, whereas the health center plan, there's less out-of-pocket expenses at the front end.
I see, that makes sense. High deductible, what does that look like?
So the,
dollar amount?
and I'm looking to Joanne to come answer questions if she needs to. But the high deductible plan basically says you're going to pay an out-of-pocket expense up to a certain threshold, and thereafter, then your insurance kicks in.
I see. Last question, just, and this could be information provided later, but which plan do most employees generally choose?
The health center plan, which is the one that we used for the total comp. Health center plan with family.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions from council? No. Thank you, Deanna.
All right. I might need help here. Christine, can you help me to get to where it's from? Okay. Well, I get the pleasure of presenting the workforce pay strategies and the entry wage analysis. And so I'll walk through this presentation with you and provide you with information that you'll need to kind of make informed decisions about direction for the city. And so this information is going to give you just kind of what we've done to date and then kind of what that might look like going forward. And I'll start with kind of just the entry wage analysis and kind of the history of where we began. And so as you know, the federal minimum wage has remained unchanged for decades. So or at $7.25. And so that rate has remained unchanged. The city's minimum wage rate has increased about 74% from 2014 to 2024. And the current rate is $15.45, and what we're proposing for fiscal year '25 is $16.07. That started at just $7.25 in fiscal year, or $7.88 in fiscal year '14. So it's grown significantly over that time. For general employees, where they on average sit is about $31.65, and so that includes all general employees, doesn't include any of the sworn individuals. When we establish our minimum wage rate, we apply that across all classifications and all jobs to include temporary and seasonal jobs. The cumulative increase that you see there at $31.65, that is only full-time employees. So it's just giving you kind of a baseline of where we sit as an organization with our workforce. When we look at market competitive pay strategies, typically what we've done historically is we utilize market data to make kind of just market-driven decisions and to analyze just our current pay structure as well as just pay practices. The last comprehensive compensation study was conducted in 2014 and implemented in 2015 in the city of Fort Worth. Thereafter, what we've done is we have a biannual market study that we do every 2 years, so it's every odd years, and we implement that information using both public and private data. So we look at benchmark cities in the state of Texas and sometimes even outside where there might not be good job matches in the state, and we also purchase private pay data. So we look at purchased private industries that might have comparable jobs to what we do. And we use that data to then decide, are the jobs in the right pay grade? Are they being paid a market industry pay, or do we need to move them in our pay structure? We evaluate our salary structure, and really we evaluate jobs annually because there might be jobs that we identify as either hard to fill or difficult to recruit for. Or maybe we're getting declined offers or just high exit strategies that warrants us to look at individual jobs. And so that's done at an individual level. And so we also look at salary surveys. So we may be reaching out in-house to other cities or other entities to look at hard-to-fill positions and making adjustments as we need. And so we do that on a regular basis, and we've done that probably more frequently in the last few years than historically, and that's just kind of the labor market where we have more jobs than people. So here's what we've done in 22. In 2022, we looked at the minimum pay rate, which increased to $15 an hour. We also adjusted our entire compensation structure by 4%. And basically what that did is it took all of our jobs and it increased the minimum and the maximum earning potential for every job in the city for general employees and increased it by 4%. So the entire structure moved by 4%. We also provided pay for performance, which is paying individuals based on their demonstrated performance and contributions to the city. We allow that range to be anywhere from 0% up to 7%. So there's some flexibility for department directors to make informed pay decisions for their workforce. In addition, in 2022, you might recall, this was kind of the ARPA funds and organizations were making those one-time awards or incentives to retain individuals. It was $1,000, $2,000, you might have heard $3,000. We did market pay adjustments using the same pay for performance data, adding 2% for individuals that were valued and 3% for individuals that were accomplished. So using that same performance data, we added it to base pay. So where other entities were doing that lump sum, we were adding it to base pay so that it was sustained and to the individual's pay and their take-home pay. And so that was an initiative that we implemented in '22. In '23, we raised the minimum wage rate again to $15.45. We also adjusted our salary structure 3%, so taking the entire structure, moving it again 3%. We also had the pay for performance, once again, using the 0 to 7% increase, allowing department heads the ability to award for performance. We had a market study for market competitiveness, which included, again, public and private data that was purchased. We also had a 2.5% market adjustment for hard-to-fill positions. So we went through and analyzed high turnover jobs, low applicant pool jobs, jobs where we were suffering in either attracting or retaining talent. Those particular jobs received, in addition to pay for performance, a 2.5% base wage rate increase. We also implemented kind of a citywide sign-on program as well as an employee referral program. And again, to attract talent to the organization. I will say, when we looked at all of that past market data and pay strategies, what we saw is that 84% of employees that received pay adjustments in '22 and '23 are still actively employed. So we feel like those base pay changes did result in what we attempted to achieve. For our hard-to-fill jobs, we saw a significant decrease in turnover. We were experiencing a 32% turnover rate in '22. That dropped to 13% in '23 for those very targeted jobs. And calendar year to date, we're hovering about 6%. And so we do feel like it's kind of had the effect that we set out to accomplish. Of the hard-to-fill jobs, that was about 35 different job titles and 1,400 employees out of our 4,700 general employees that exist in the city's workforce.
Yeah, and I think Councilman Flores had a question, and then Councilman Nettles.
On this topic right here, Deanna, what is, or does the city have a specific target in mind when it comes to retention? You say that your results indicated 84%, and that was acceptable and satisfactory to you all, but did you have a goal set out before you did this?
Yeah, so the attrition goal that we're hoping to get back to, and it looks like we're nearing there, is to stay below 10%. So attrition's going to occur, right? We recognize that. But historically, it was about 10%. We saw that rise in upwards of 20% for our general employees. We're trying to get back to kind of a normal state so that we can manage with retaining some level of continuity with our workforce. So that was kind of our ultimate goal. And this is calendar year data, so we kind of measure that at year end. Employees make employment decisions at the year end, and so we have to kind of just keep monitoring that as the year continues.
Okay. And the follow-up question, given that municipal employees sometimes go from one city to the other, do we keep track of what other comparable cities do in terms of their attrition goals?
Yes, we keep track based on just kind of our HR network. We really keep track of just kind of not only their attrition, but just some of their pay initiatives. Organizations were doing kind of the sign-on bonus. We were also kind of leading the effort there as well. They were making just different pay decisions and pay strategies around pay. I believe our efforts were better because we weren't doing the lump sum one-time awards. We were doing base pay effects, so.
Thank you.
Councilman Nettles.
Yes, question on the hard-to-fill jobs. you said it was about 30, how many, about 80 jobs?
So it was 36 jobs that we identified that were hard to fill, 35 classifications, 1,400
Could you
employees.
list a few of them off? I mean, they're in the low level or in the high level as it?
There were everywhere, so
Okay, sure.
I can list a few off because it was jobs, you know, even in the deputy city marshal, engineering positions, equipment operators, maintenance workers, there were customer service reps, recreation assistants. It was across every job in family. So it wasn't just limited to the entry roles, it was across all of our organization.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Hill?
So when you say hard to fill, are those jobs that have been left vacant for a certain time period, or how do you, what's the definition of that?
Yep, so it was a combination of activities. So it was everything from jobs that stayed vacant or that had a very low applicant pool. So, you know, in normal jobs, we can attract in upwards of 100 plus. These jobs were seeing applicants of less than 10. And so we looked at that data, we looked at turnover data, we looked at declined job offers. So we looked at a variety of activities that would indicate that there was an issue or concern.
Councilmember Beck?
Deanna, can you tell me what the average cost is of onboarding a new employee to the city of Fort Worth?
Yeah, so there's kind of a variety of schools of thought there. It can be anywhere in upwards of half the annualized salary of the position to just onboard an individual. And so you've heard me say it, you know, I get the attraction and the acquisition of new talent. I want to keep the talent that we have in the organization. I want to grow that talent, and I want to promote those employees to have careers with the city of Fort Worth. And so we aim to kind of accomplish all of that. And so we have to have that focused perspective that's across the organization as we make pay decisions.
Okay, so you said up to half of the salary.
Correct.
Correct. Is there a bottom? You gave us the top limit, is there?
Actually, the top is a full salary. I think the median is about half the annualized salary.
So if we're lucky, we get out of it with about half of their salary as the total estimated cost for onboarding a new employee.
Correct.
That's best case scenario.
Yeah, and that's just kind of an HR rule of thumb.
Sure.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? You can keep going, Deanna. Thank you.
So here's the results of pay for performance. And I'll say, having worked in 3 cities, this being my 3rd city in another county, I've never seen a bell curve so nice as I've seen here in the city of Fort Worth. So hats off to the department directors that manage performance and their management personnel that kind of manage all of these activities. But you'll see, using that 0 to 7%, it has a really nice bell curve where most of the employees are sitting at 4% increases for their performance contributions to the organization. In fiscal year 25, we're also proposing that same 4% increase with 0 to 7 being the range. In 24, it averaged right about 4.02%. 99.4% of the employees that received more than 4% are still employed with the city. So those are our high performers, high potential individuals that are still with the organization. This, in fiscal year 23, about 88.5% of the employees that received more than 4% are still employed with the city of Fort Worth. And again, those are the individuals that's your high quality talent that you want to preserve in the organization. So it does show kind of a nice bell curve distribution of pay for performance.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Deanna, just a question for you. Have you previously run the numbers to show what it would take to get $20 an hour as our minimum? Have you run?
Yes, and I'll get to, there's a slide in the presentation that will kind of talk us through that.
Okay, okay.
And here's the turnover data. So this gives you kind of the aggregate data across all classifications, the fire, police, and general employees. We are trending downward in calendar year 24. And so that's good news, right? If you look at calendar year 23 and 22 for general employees, we were exceeding 20%. In 22, we closed the year at 24.25% turnover. That's 1 in 4 employees on the general employee side. So that was a huge problem. We're trending at 5.79 calendar year to date. And so we're projecting that that number is going to decrease and normalize. Councilmember Flores, to your question earlier, we're getting back, I would hope, but we're getting back to kind of normalized attrition and turnover. You'll see the same is true in police and fire. Their numbers are coming down. And so we're seeing that make some great improvement. And then just across the organization, it's getting to a better place.
Deanna, do you see similarities with national economic and job data based on COVID, the Great Resignation, where the country was from a job perspective, and things have kind of stabilized because the economy is where it is?
I believe that is the case, and that's what we're hearing in just the HR profession, is that things are starting to normalize just because of some of the uncertainty with the economy. So there's just those predictions. We are seeing where we're budgeting 4% for pay for performance, we're seeing organizations dip that down. So they're falling between 3.75 and 3.8 on pay increases. So we're seeing things go back and I'm going to say normalized pre-COVID.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Deanna, I'm noticing there's a significant difference between general police and fire in terms of the average retention over this time period. What are some of the drivers where, for police and fire that keeps retention low in comparison to general employees?
Yeah, I'll say for the sworn members, it's probably going to be their contracts and their guaranteed step increases, as well as just year-over-year increases to their rates of pay. For general employees, I think in 2020, during the COVID year, they saw, they didn't see the increase that they would have seen to base pay. And so it's going to be the contractual. And then, of course, the fire and police, they do see that as an industry profession, and so they grow in that organization through those step increases and through the ranks. For general employees, it's still competitive, right? You're still competing to get into a higher role or for promotional opportunity. And so the other piece is that just working in the metro area, it's really just a matter of going east or west or north or south in the highway to get to a neighboring city. And so that, contributes to the turnover issue when we have more jobs than people. And so that's an area of concern that we've identified.
That makes total sense. I know that as a council, we tackled that challenge with police and Councilman Nettles was definitely vocal on this issue, but with our recruit pay, it was severely low. We were losing recruits to other cities. And we decided as a council to do something about that. In fact, I think we all wanted to do more than what police was willing to do at that time, because we thought they should be around $75,000. But they advised us to hold off and we would get there. But it's just impressive to see the differences in turnover compared to police and fire.
Yeah, and I'll say just city government entities, municipalities, the trend is right about 10 to 12%. So these numbers of what we were seeing in 23 and 24 and 22, a lot of other municipalities were seeing the very same experience. And police and fire have always just historically trended lower. So this gives you kind of just an overview of total compensation. And I shared this.
Councilmember Beck, go ahead.
Sorry,
Oh, so
Deanna, I
sorry.
didn't catch it before you slipped. So you said that that for general employees across municipalities, the trend tends to be 10 to 12%
Correct.
turnover?
That's the normal trend.
Okay, and so that would put us about almost 6% above the trend that we see for municipalities. Is that correct?
6% above? Are you counting 24 or the previous years?
You tell me, because I'm looking at the general number for general employees.
Yeah, so for general employees, we're trending right below 6% right now for 24.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
for general employees.
But industry, so where does, I guess, I'm a little, can you tell me where the 10 to 12% comes from?
Oh, that's just a benchmark. That's just kind of a traditional municipal benchmark. It was about 10 to 12% pre-COVID. So I think a lot of organizations experienced the same spikes that we saw.
Okay.
And so they're starting to kind of normalize back to pre-COVID.
Yeah, and we don't know, we haven't done that post-COVID, then I'm assuming. We don't know what that trend
No.
looks like.
No.
Okay, and so this year we're under because it's only till April, but it looks like for general employees, we've been almost double in some
Correct.
years.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So this gives you just a total compensation overview for pension specifically. And so I share this with you because it shows kind of just the position of Fort Worth. And so Fort Worth Employee Retirement Fund, again, the contribution rate just being 10.95, the employer rate 26.64. In comparison to Dallas Employees Retirement Fund, where their employee contribution is 13.32, but the employer contribution is 14.46. And so that's, the closest city with a comparable pension fund similar to the cities, but our contribution rate as an employer is a lot higher. When you look at statewide retirement systems, so TMRS, Employee Retirement System, TCDRS, their contribution rates on the employer side at the highest with ERS of Texas is 16.83, TMRS 14.5, and then TCDRS at 12.3. So it puts the city at a slight disadvantage just because our contributions are higher on the pension side, all for good cause, but it does have an effect on the total compensation. The other issue that we're faced with the statewide retirement systems is they're portable, so people can move around through different systems and maintain that vesting schedule as well as their contributions. Where Fort Worth, it's specific to Fort Worth, and Dallas would be the same. So you have just some examples to show, again, just total compensation. If we're starting at $20 an hourly rate, once you add in all of those benefits to include pension and healthcare, it's more like $29.31 for the total hourly rate. And then the same is true at $25 an hour. It's an upwards of $35 an hour for just the total hourly rate.
Councilmember Williams? And then Blaylock.
Go ahead. So, Deanna, just as a point of interest, when I'm looking at the employer contribution to the pension plans, and we're talking about total compensation as compared to private sector or general standards, do we have any data on what is generally contributed by the employer for a 401k, as an example, is this instead of a pension?
Well, the real example that I can share with you is MedStar. And so, looking at how they contribute to their employees' 401k, it's a 5% match. And so it's significantly less. I think there's some positions where it might be 7%. And so it's significantly less contributions on the employer side. And so that's a real example. I think it just depends. It might depend on the position in each organization, but this does, our contribution rates puts us at a disadvantage.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. Deanna, on this slide, the employer rates for the city of Fort Worth, is that state mandated, or is that our internal standard?
It's mandated by our code, and I'm looking to the legals.
Our employer rate?
By our,
Yeah, it was all dictated in 2019 with all those pension changes to keep our pension stabilized, so.
That makes
And I think
sense.
Dallas would rather be in our position, frankly, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
and that's
says
how
yes.
it's,
Yeah.
that's how it's being managed, so we don't have the state step in, right? We're trying to make sure that we can manage the pension fund. You heard from the pension board not long ago on just the financial standing of the pension.
Yep.
And so lots of decisions were made to make sure that it could remain sound and decrease the years to cover the liability and expenses for the fund.
That makes sense. And one last question, this might be very elementary, but do employees get the chance, do they have the choice to cash out on their pension contributions, or how do they access those funds?
Okay, so if they're active employees, first I'll say it's mandated. So every employee that joins the city of Fort Worth, it's full-time. It's a mandatory contribution. They don't get to choose. Second is they don't get to cash out their funds. So it stays there until they either meet the rule of 80 or 25 years and out for police. So once they meet that rule, they have a calculated formula based on their high earnings that will derive a benefit that they'll be entitled to for the rest of their life. So unlike a 401k where you get just the contributions that you put in, this pension is really nice because you're going to get that benefit for the rest of your life.
But vesting is still at 5 years,
And the
correct?
vesting is at 5
So an
years.
employee could leave and take their vested interest in those pension funds and take it to another retirement fund.
And they'll get their contributions
Right.
if they leave within that 5-year period. If they leave outside of the 5-year period, that option's still open to them. I'd never recommend it because you'd eventually hit that retirement eligibility age, but that is an option.
And then last question from a budget perspective, what revenue source do we contribute the employer contribution out of, and how's the funds held until the employee's retired?
Yeah, and so I think it depends on where the position's budgeted, but as I said earlier, 30% or 70% of the general fund supports salaries, pension, and benefits. So this next slide provides you with minimum wage survey, and you've seen this before, so it kind of gives you all of the cities that we typically benchmark against in the state of Texas. It includes Dallas and Tarrant County, just because they're in our respective area. But the survey average is about $15.31 per hour. What we're proposing is $16.07, so a 4% increase in fiscal year '24. We use the same cities for police meet and confer as well as collective bargaining that are in Texas so that we could benchmark against them. And so this provides you with just some data of where that rate is. It's as low as $9.74 in one city and as high as $20.80 in another. So here's some different kind of wage analysis scenarios. What we're showing here is that if we go to 1607 as proposed, we'll have about 121 employees impacted across 15 job classifications. There's no pay structure impact because, again, we're getting the entire structure and moving it up 4%. And so the total cost to fund this initiative is about $679,000. We did provide some additional scenarios so that you could see the impact to the other alternative wage rates. And so I'll start with just using the example of $18 an hour. And so if we go to $18 an hour, there's about 525 employees that are affected. It's a cost increase of $2.9 million. That's just taking those employees that fall below that rate and bringing them up to $18 an hour. But if you take that same variance and spread it across your organizational structure, the entire compression impact is about $65.9 million. So it has a much larger price tag. If you look at the scenario of $20 an hour, that's about 773 employees that fall below that $20 threshold. The cost to increase pay would be $5.3 million. The cost to address compression is $117 million. And just to kind of put things into perspective, for the $18 an hour, if you did the full wage increase in compression, that dollar amount, roughly right about, the $66 million would be enough funding to close the gap on the street maintenance fee. So just to kind of put things into perspective. And the $20 an hour wage gap, that's a significant dollar amount, the 117. That's greater than all of the decision packages that have been submitted for fiscal year '25. So just to kind of give you some information. I think what I'd like to share, as you look at the $18 an hour, looking at the 525 employees, about half of those, if not more, are under the age of 25. So we have 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are sitting in that pay range. And the same is true when you even look at $20 an hour. Those individuals tend to be 25 and younger. Not all of them, but probably about half of those individuals are right about that, that interval. So I want to share with you just some wage compression examples. And these are real people. The names have been changed, but these are real individuals. And so when I first looked at this, I was a little bit surprised because I saw the food and beverage attendant, and you'll see that pay grade 503, and it sits right beneath a code compliance tech at 504. And so when I first saw this, I was shocked. But then I had to remember when we made some of our pay decisions, we affected our salary structure. And so there used to be a 500, a 501, a 502, and we've eliminated 3 of our pay grades to achieve the minimum wage rate entry that we proposed. And so now you have a food and beverage attendant that sits comparable to a code compliance tech, and we know those jobs are very different skill sets, very different value, but we've compressed our structure. And so if you look at the example here, you have an employee that's a food and beverage attendant at $15.45. We're going to propose 1607, so it's going to put them just a little bit closer to the code compliance tech. If we go to $18 an hour, that variance starts to close the gap between those two different jobs. And if you go to $20 an hour, and in fact, if we go to $18 an hour, that 503 and 504 are no longer two different pay grades, they become one. So then we have a food beverage attendant and a code compliance tech in the exact same pay grade. But this gives you kind of an example of just kind of what those, how these individual jobs are different. Then you'll see the 505 pay grade for a senior maintenance worker lead that's currently making $17.62. New to the organization, not been here very long, bring them up to $18 an hour. They start to compress with all of the other jobs, $20 an hour, and you're paying 3 different classifications that were spread across 3 different pay grades, the exact same salary. And the other piece that I wanted to show, it also happens in grade compression. And so you have a maintenance worker in this particular scenario making $16.45, fairly new to the organization. Maintenance worker who's been with us for 27 years making $22 an hour, and you just start to compress that. And so what I hear, right, in going out to some of the field sites and hearing from our field workers is, hey, it's great that you increase minimum wage, but what about me? Right? What about me? I have to train that guy, and I've been here for 10 years, and it took me 10 years to get to that wage rate, and does the city care about me? And so we're like, we're coming, right? We're trying to come up with solutions to look at and evaluate our pay structure. And we've said that, right? We absolutely care about our employees, and that's why a lot of our pay strategies that have been adopted through the budget process by council were to address our existing workforce. And so we do show that those data points have worked. But these are just giving you some examples, some data, so that you can kind of just keep it front and center of how wage compression works. And so you see it across the classifications and then even in grade compression.
Deanna, question about compression. If you go back and look at the figures in the chart, let's take the $18 example. Compression is 62.9 million. Is that compression figured into the entire workforce?
Correct.
All the way up to the city manager's office?
I think it goes up to director, executive.
Director and down. Okay, thank you. Questions from council? Yeah, Carlos.
I think there's an important distinction here, at least for me. There is a difference between wage compression and grade, compression. I think that's what you're saying, correct, Deanna? And I understand that structurally, if you eliminate some of these too broad, categories of pay grades, you're able to afford yourself more latitude, right, with the remaining bands to compensate for wage compression, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and yes, just the pay grade compression, we started off, we've already eliminated 3 pay grades. If we move to 18, we'll eliminate 2. If we move to 20, we'll eliminate 4. And so, again, then we have these job classifications, 193 jobs spread across 11 pay grades. We're going to compress that down to less pay grades. And so these jobs are going to have overlapping pay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Deanna, again, hats off, great presentation. I just wanted stated in the record that Fort Worth Housing Solutions made a decision years ago to pay no workers under $20 an hour. That took real strength, real fortitude, and some hard decisions to make, but that's Fort Worth Housing Solutions. I've never been a council member to tell HR how much to pay people, but I will tell this council, at some point in time, we're going to have to figure out and understand that you can't fund everything, but you do need to take care of your people. Years ago, when I had buddies like Zim Zimmerman, Jungus Jordan, we tried to make the point that public art could be a place that doesn't really impact people's paying electric bills and food bills, stuff like that. I am not advocating for that. I got one more year. I'm not going to wage any kind of fight. But I encourage this council to remember we have to take care of our people. And just because the budget shows different categories of things that we fund, we have to remember people. And so you can have greater longevity, you can have happier employees if you pay them decent wages. And again, hats off to Mary Margaret Lemons for leading that board. Nobody there makes under $20 an hour. And so that's just what I leave with you. Deanna, you know I support you 150%. You know, you inherited a situation and made it better. But those are just some things that I ask this council to think about in budgets to come.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And what I'll add is in the fiscal year 25 budget, what HR is recommending is a full compensation study to look at two parts. Not only to look at pay, to include minimum wage rates, but to look at the salary structures that we fractured, but to also look at where our employees sit in comparison to their pay. So you heard me say we do biannual market studies, we do market studies. All of that is great, but we don't do movement of our workforce. And what I've noticed is that employees with 10 or more years of service, they should be sitting at midpoint. That's not the case for the workforce in the city of Fort Worth. Yeah. So on average, they sit right below 1%, meaning they could go garner a midpoint market competitive pay rate in another entity. That's the turnover I'm trying to turn off. And so I understand the entry component, but just as the employees, when I had to sit across the table and face them to say, what about me? What are you doing to address me? So when we want to do a compensation study that's two-part. Looks at our salary structure, looks at wage rates, looks at job classifications, and then the second part to look at the actual where our employees reside in their respective pay grade, and how do we make movement for those individuals to move them further into the pay grade. Because if they're at 10 years or more service, they should be sitting higher in that pay grade, and that's not the case.
Short women rule the world. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams, did you have a question? Somebody did. I missed a hand. Maybe it was you. Sorry, Chris.
I'll jump in. I was really trying to wait until you got one more slide. And so I was trying to wait till you finish, but I wanted to kind of jump in there, even on this slide right here. And I hear you. And doing some when you was talking, when you talked about the age and the pay grade, I was ready to say objection, but we wasn't in court. I was like, I felt like you was giving your closing remarks. And I hear you. And so I want to say, when I say $20 an hour, I'm not just talking about the entry level or the new onboard employees. And actually, this slide actually shows that. To go back to the slide you was just on.
Okay.
This right here. I mean, to have a senior maintenance worker as a lead making $20 an hour, a senior maintenance worker making less than $20 an hour, saying $20 an hour as a minimum wage not only increase the onboarding process, but it's going to take his salary up to $20. Although in your own words, he should be making way more than what he's making now. And the reality is that we as a city, when we are not where we should be, does not mean we keep on snowballing how we get there. And so I think we should take a strong approach, a bold approach, and say, nobody in the city of Fort Worth is going to make $20 an hour. And we're going to do a study in 2025. I don't care for studies because I think we already know the answers. But for somebody to come, for us to pay millions of dollars to somebody else to tell us what we already know, and I'm not discrediting what you're trying to do. I think we still can do the study. But I don't think we need to study in order to say we need to pay people $20 an hour. I think the study should say, the movement process, as you just explained, I think that's going to be a great study. And so if you go back to the next slide, the previous slide.
Yeah.
Even on this slide, if we just take care of those who are making less than $20 an hour, is a $5.3 million increase to the budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that's for just
Okay.
those employees.
Just those employees. Now, we're going to have those employees that say, hey, you know, I'm training this guy and I'm going to make it $21 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the compression for the next compression cost for,
Correct.
which would be, where am I?
112,
112.
117. Mhm.
Okay. And go back to Mayor Pro Tem discussion, how you talk about one of those could completely do our street and maintenance fees. and X, Y, and Z. We have some hard conversations that we need to have when it comes to the budget process. And I think one of the hardest conversations we need to have is how do we take care of our in-house employees? And we know that $20 an hour is not even a livable wage. It's about 22 to 27. And so we're not actually getting there, we're on our way. And so I'm going to ask this council, I have sent notification to David, he's not here, but he has it, that I believe that it's important that in this budget cycle that we increase the minimum wage. As Jared alluded to earlier, when we looked at the recruiting process for our police officers who put their lives on line every single day, just to get them to go through the recruiting process, we was below the totem pole. And we unanimously took that to a higher level. And I don't know what the pay is for different employees, but I can only imagine that you talk about 16, 18-year-olds, they're probably our library workers, they're probably our pool attendants, they're probably our lifeguards and X, Y, and Z. And the reality, if we don't have those people, then we have to close the beautiful Forest Park pool that we just opened up because we don't have people that's going to be, and I'm just throwing things out there. I'm not saying that's the actual amount, but this is just my closing remarks of what I believe that we should get to $20 an hour. And I know you have another slide, so I have more things I want to say, but I just kind of wanted to jump in on that, the fact that a senior maintenance guy, you can just take the senior off because he's not being paid for what his title talks about. And I know we kind of had this when I deal with city management with some of our in the CMO staff. They were having these, I deal with it with you, we were having titles that did not represent their pay. And so you have these cute titles and they're not representing what we actually getting paid. And so I think I have a problem with that. And I think that study is going to help with that.
Councilor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. This slide is a beautiful slide because it gives the why for why I am advocating for $20. Just to put $16 in perspective, that's $2,400 a month. And we just saw it, health insurance for someone, regardless of their age, if they have a kiddo, they have to pay $789 for insurance for that kiddo. Well, I'm not good at math, but I think that's around $1,500. Let's talk about rent. Average rent, $1,200 to $1,400 if you're lucky, or you need subsidized housing at that point. The check is gone. And each one of these job descriptions, when we talk about compression, families in these positions aren't talking about compression. They're talking about, how do I pay for childcare? How do I pay for housing? How do I put food on my table? And if I can't, I'm gonna go see Jared at the food bank. And all of these grades should be paid so that they can live with dignity in the city. It hits me hard as a council member to hear us justify why we pay people a pitiful wage, saying that they're under 25, 50% under 25, 50% are over 25. And $16 an hour is $28,000. The federal poverty level for a household of two is $25,000. And I thank the Lord that God values me and all of us more than a flock of sparrows. And I thank the Lord that God says that the worker deserves to be fed. These wages, they can't be fed. And compression is it's an important thing. Yes, we have to address it, but that's not something we have to address today. And we're not asking any employee to take a pay cut. We're saying, let's make sure all of our workers can be fed. And we'll take care of compression, we'll take care of the market study, but we have to do what's urgent now. Our employees who are getting paid $15.45 can't wait another minute, let alone a year for a study, if it takes a year. And so this is urgent for me. I respect you a whole heck of a lot. You have carried us a long way along with management. But as city council, we have to set the values of this organization. And we cannot continue to tell people they are not valued because of the job that they're doing that's essential to the city, that if they weren't doing it,
we would be up a creek.
Yeah, and as the HR director, I mean, I have to close to say I support that position and that we have to take care of our employees. And as noted, there were 775 employees that would be affected. There's 4,000 employees that would be left untouched. And that's just the part of, that's the reality of it all. And so this last example just kind of walks back through just the structural changes that are, that will affect compression and overlapping. And it's really just gets to the value of the jobs and how we start to kind of fracture that structure that was created. Just shows some different criteria on issues with any changes that might be proposed by council.
Councilmember Beck?
I really appreciate this, Deanna. I know I can tell a ton of work went into laying this all out for us. It is certainly not a inexpensive endeavor to raise the city's minimum wage to 20 or to 18 or 17 if we look at these compression charts. I want to urge you to find a way to get to that 20. MIT says that a living wage for a single person in the city of Fort Worth is $22 an hour. So we're not even getting to a wage which a city of Fort Worth employee can pay for rent and food and transportation to live in our city. And I think we all take so much pride in the city of Fort Worth. So to say that we're setting our employees up so they can't take that same pride and choose to live here without some sort of subsidy says a lot. And when we speak to that subsidy, we'll come back to this table, and we often talk about affordable housing and the number of affordable housing units we're short in the city. Mary Margaret is not here, and Gina has stepped out, but I would venture to bet that that raise that Fort Worth Housing Solutions got was tied to the fact that they didn't want their employees to have to they didn't have to build housing for their very own employees. And I think we at the city don't want to have to build housing for our very own employees. I will end on a couple of things because I really don't want to belabor this point, but it's $41,000 a year if we made it to 20,000. 7 members sitting at this table today said that $60,000 was a livable wage for members of council, and we went out and asked the voters to give us that raise, which is $20,000 more than what members of this council are asking you to give our lowest paid employees annually in a raise. And it is a tough budget decision, but it was a tough budget decision when we didn't have enough people to answer 911. And we gave a significant raise to those folks to retain them here at the city. We did the same thing for our police recruits. We gave a significant raise to make sure that we were attracting and retaining the best that we possibly could. We did the same with lifeguards. Councilman Nettles brought up Forest Park Pool. And not last summer, the summer before, we were in dire straits with our lifeguards, and we couldn't keep those our pools open in the hours that we had promised because we didn't have the basic employees to keep those operational. And what did we do? We gave them a pay raise. And so that's really what we're asking for here. And the number that I would like us to look at and where I'm going to ask for some additional information is when we talk about onboarding and retention. What the data really shows is that as we value our employees and we value them we have a very robust compensation package, one that I'm very proud of, that really wraps around our employees, but at the end of the day, they want to be able to pay their bills. And so that we know that pay increases help with retention. And if we're talking about half of an annualized salary to onboard, if we're lucky, half of that salary. So at $20 an hour, that's $20,000 that a new employee costs the city of Fort Worth. And so what I would like are the numbers, and I appreciate the lab working on this as well, is what that attrition and hiring those new employees cost. Because my guess is at half, it's pretty significant. So if there is an initial cost to the city in raising that minimum wage, but what cost savings do we have in the fact that we are no longer losing employees at a rate that's double what the national average is? And I think that cost savings needs to be incorporated into any analysis that we do moving forward, whether it's $20 an hour, stagnant, 16, whatever that is. I'd like to know what that is, because I think that helps us make a more informed decision.
Carlos.
This may be something that staff is prepared to present maybe later, but I know that, I've been approached, by some folks, and the MIT study has been referenced even back at our prior council meeting, right? I looked at that calculator and, poked around with it, but, I'm no expert with it. I know what factors go into it. I mean, there are essentially 8, right? Childcare, civic engagement, food, healthcare, housing, internet, mobile, transportation, other necessities that, many of us have already mentioned here while we're talking. But what I would like to see, again, and, we're all talking about wanting to see numbers, what you presented here is helpful. But I'd like to see some numbers run through that calculator. I want to see some scenarios that, see how they correspond or correlate, to what these numbers here that you're presenting have, right? I think that's would be a fair, comparison, because ultimately, I think where we're all at is this. We all agree that our city employees are valued, and that value should reflect in their compensation. I think we all agree with that. Our challenge is to find exactly what that compensation figure is and balance that against our budget. It's very simple, right? But getting there is very involved. So we need to afford ourselves every measure to see exactly where we lie. Again, what we can afford and what they need, to have, a wage that helps them to live, to thrive, and also is commensurate and sustainable.
Yeah, and I'll share with you, we did look at that analysis, and so we used all of these city and the MIT living wage tool. Not one city meets or exceeds the living wage that's recommended.
Okay.
They all fall below. San Antonio being the closest at $2.45 variance, but it's all over the board, and that's just for one adult.
Will we have a breakout of those?
We can break that
runs?
out. We have that analysis. It was kind of late, and, I'd been out for a couple of weeks, so it's kind of late. When you look at 2 working adults, the gap gets closer, and we're right on par with where we need to be. But there's so many varieties and different factors that are used in that living wage tool. But we did go back and kind of look at it in comparison, just to see, are we comparing apples to
Yeah,
apples? with this
exactly. And
data?
inflation being one of those factors that has had a lot of variability lately.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the graph, it really depends on what slice of time, just on that one factor,
Exactly.
you look at. So that's what I'm interested in seeing.
Yeah, and we can provide that, but again, we're providing just facts. The will of council will be the direction that we go, but it's just factual information so that you can make an informed decision.
If I can interject, Carlos, I actually had the same thought you did about when you're looking at this comparison. So I went to the MIT website and just pulled Austin, Dallas, Denton, El Paso, and then I kind of stopped. So none of them, no city gets to that livable wage, right? Austin is $20 and their livable wage is $23, so they're about $3 under. $20 puts us at $2 under. City of Dallas is $22 is comparable to Fort Worth, and they're at 18. City of Denton, 23, and they're at 18. City of El Paso is $18 for an hour for a livable wage, and they're at 13. So no one does meet that perfect number, but we're not asking for that perfect number today. And so I think that puts us on par with other cities in being close, but maybe not quite there.
And just to add some context, I know that Dallas, Denton, Austin are all looking in this budget cycle to increase again. So they're going to get closer to that living wage.
Councilmember Larsdorf.
Yeah. So is there a way I can get a list of all those the employee job titles that are currently under the $20 range? Because one of the things I'm worried about, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, is going to be the attrition. And to Councilmember Beck's point on onboarding and the costs associated with that, I think the wage compression example that you gave it's pretty alarming. And I think we could see where it's probably going to go If you have a code compliance technician who's out there, cleaning up egret poop, and they're getting paid 20, and then you find out that food and beverage attendants also now gonna get 20, well, they're gonna leave that job and they're gonna go start slinging Snickers. And so what's it gonna cost to replace all those code compliance officers who wouldn't leave their job if someone else is making the same amount of money for far less, I guess, effort, I guess you could say. They're still valued, but they're just, what they're doing is not as difficult. It's not gonna require as much training. Certainly not being hated by neighbors for driving down streets, taking photos of, code compliance issues, or dealing with homes in disrepair. So I would like to see a list of all those employee job titles, because maybe there's something we can look at for some of those very low entry jobs, perhaps, food and beverage, and perhaps there's a contractor out there that can provide those to where we're not having to pay the 26% retirement fund and all the additional things that put their total package to a much higher number, right? So perhaps we can find, because I think what you're gonna find is if we do move forward with something along those lines, everyone's gonna be flocking to those jobs making $20 an hour, and then we're gonna have all these vacancies that we can't fill. Then we're gonna have residents coming at us like, hey, this isn't happening. Well, there's no one to fill those jobs because they're going after, that food and beverage attendant job. So I know I would just like to see a list of those job titles that's under 20, just to kind of see if we can figure out where else we can maybe staff those jobs from.
Okay, we can provide that.
Councilmember Martinez, you didn't have any questions, did you? Sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen.
No, I was just waiting my turn.
Go ahead, please.
Just want to say that I'm in support of the $20 minimum pay wage. This is the right thing to do. We need to take care of our employees and then figure out how to make it right in those other higher positions. So just wanted to make it known that I am in support.
Thank you, Councilmember Martinez. Any other questions? Councilmember Hill?
Not really a question, just general comment. I firmly believe we need to run the city like we run our household. Don't spend more than you make. The money has to come from somewhere. So we're gonna have to cut somewhere else to make sure that we're getting the $20 an hour that y'all want. I don't disagree that we need to pay people a livable wage and pay them for the work that they do. And I think pay for performance is the way to do that. I don't think the $20 an hour minimum across the board is the right thing to do at the city right now. I mean, we're looking at a huge deficit on street maintenance fees. People want to pay for essential services. That's what they believe their tax dollars go towards. So let's be cognizant of that, at how we're funding this, what we're looking at, but we can't spend more than we make. So I think we need to have some tough conversations on, are we running the city as efficiently as possible? Are the positions that we're currently funding getting the job done? Do we have too many positions? Do we have too many people? Those are going to be the tough conversations we need to have.
Council, anybody else on the round table? Councilmember Nettles?
No, I agree. And I think, and I spoke with some people the other day, and the question was, what do you cut? And I think that boils down to our city staff of actually bringing together a package that, well, we can do this. I mean, Mayor Pro Tem alluded to, and I don't think she's against it, but she alluded to art. I mean, there are things that this city of Fort Worth, you are against it, okay.
Since you gave her the opportunity. Yeah.
So I wholeheartedly agree that we don't want to spend more than we make. And I will say, the city of Fort Worth does have the capital, does have the money. And I asked for this, I think when you first came on, is that at the end of the year, we sit at not a deficit. We sit as actually brought in more money than we actually spent out. And I like to call it a slush fund. And, when we had that slush fund, she's not here, so she have to hear it on recording, we spent $2 million on relighting the 7th Street Bridge that already had lights. We didn't need to spend that money on that. We could have spent that on something else as into employees. So I think there really are funds that we have that are available that we have budgeted that we don't spend. And so I think it's really incumbent on staff to, where are those places that we know that we're gonna have extra income coming out, extra dollars laying around, that we actually can, maybe it's not 20, but it cannot be 16. It may be 18, but we cannot leave this table. And I'm not trying to rally for 18, my position is 20, but where can we go from here? I don't agree that it should be 16. And I agree with the fact that we, as Charlie stated, and even Dr. Williams stated, is that we can't fix everything in one budget cycle. Last budget, we argued, I think we was 3 months in, 3 weeks in, and we was arguing for additional firefighters. And we had to fight like The Rock and Stone Cold, for those that remember back in the day, just to get those firefighters. And so I think this council has been willing to, when we had a lot of hard decisions when we first came on council. And I think we're willing to have those conversations. And so I think if staff can show us, I mean, you guys are doing the numbers. We need you to bring us packages that actually make sense. And no, we don't want to get rid of pay-go. No, we don't want to get rid of street fees. But some of this other stuff that we need to, we can.
So maybe offer this as a potential path forward, because we have to make any decision in the context of the entire budget. And to Macy's point, what would you cut that we're willing to cut if this is a priority for the whole council, or if there's any pay increases at all? And there's still a lot more information I think all of us have articulated we would like to see. Charlie mentioned a list of all the employees that would be impacted, what their current pay grade is, what their job responsibilities are. I have a lot of questions and maybe even concerns around tenure, especially at our entry-level workers that are interfacing with the public so often. And if you've been at the city for 27 years in a certain position, is there some consideration and prioritization of those people to make sure they're taken care of? Those are just open questions. We know that the certified role will come out in July. I think maybe the best thing to do to make this most constructive so that we're not making emotional decisions is to think about the big buckets we're gonna have as a city to face in a tighter budget year the very first week of August, and really deal with these collectively rather than one by one. This is a great start, but this is something that the council wants to come back to and really consider again. That may be, there's a lot of other things that we've put forward. Street maintenance fee has been mentioned as something. We've got to deal with MedStar coming into the city of Fort Worth. So what are the big rocks that we can work with management on that we know need to be considered? And then what are we going to cut? Because if all of these things are on the table as additions to the budget, there's only limited amount of revenue. We're also in a year of limited sales tax increase. We have not seen what we wanted to see in revenue increases. And we certainly don't want to create more headache for Deanna. The other thing I would, you don't have to answer it today, I'm just curious how long a true pay study would take. Is it a year? Is it half a year? When would we have that data? I think would be an important consideration as we consider any kind of entry-level wage increases this year.
We would expect it to be completed in fiscal year '25 to be implemented in '26.
Why does it take so long?
It wouldn't take that long. It would help us navigate through the budget because it'll still have a fiscal impact that we'll need to program in.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I will close just by saying I can confidently sit across staff when they ask questions about what about me and say council is fully supportive of employees that contribute to making sure the business works and operates as it should. And so appreciate the dialogue and conversation.
Well, we appreciate you. You've worked incredibly. You do a fantastic job, your entire team in HR. We're very thankful for your leadership, and we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you getting us to this place. Councilmember Vins.
I don't want to clear my name, but I do want to offer some clarity in terms of my being against public art. I think I can just tell you, if you listen to your constituents will tell you that they appreciate nice streets, sidewalks, street lights. I doubt very seriously if you have more than 5% who will tell you, I need a piece of public art over there. I will tell you, when I came on board, we had public art projects that had been approved in a 2004 bond election, and in 2013, they still weren't done. And so it's not that I'm against public art, I'm just for my people. And as long as I'm riding around this city and I see potholes, not just in 5, I see street lights out, I don't care why they're out. I see trash not picked up, oh darn, did I mention that again? But I think if you listen to the constituents, we'll know what they deem as priority. So it's not like you're just saying, write a check and don't worry about it. Just listen to the people. But to listen to them, we have to make information available to them. And we do that in this process through the public hearings, the meetings that we have. And so encourage your people to come out. Who knows, you may have a whole bunch of people who just love public art and make me look real stupid right now. But I will tell you, the basic services are what people want to know that we're addressing.
Yeah.
And that includes taking care of our people.
And I think to credit to city management in the last few budgets I've presided over, management has met that moment. It's about quality of life. When we go through our council retreat, the things that we prioritized are most important are included in the budget. Let's carry that over into August. I would encourage each of you, especially on this, because there's so much data you'd want to go through, to really work with Deanna and Mark and the city management team to give feedback on that. There may be some things you individually want to see that can be provided to us over the break in July. But these are hard decisions, right? There are necessities and there are nice to haves. And in this budget cycle, you're going to have a lot of nice to haves we have to eliminate just because the budget is going to be tighter. And because there's so much conversation, understandably, around housing affordability, around property taxes. And it seems to be enhanced right now more so than the last several years, at least in my opinion. So appreciate everybody's dialogue. Next up, Deanna, you're not done yet.
I'm not done
Bless your
yet, but
heart.
actually I'm going to turn over the reins here. We're one of the departments that have partnered with Fort Worth Lab on priority-based budgeting, which is kind of really the tool that just helps align budget with priorities. So kind of to Mayor Pro Tem Bivens' point. And so Cynthia Hume is our Administrative Services Manager with the Human Resources Department, and she's going to cover the priority-based budgeting for HR. Cynthia?
Thank you. Good morning. Just want to go ahead and give you a little preview of what we did for our HR department on the priority-based budgeting. So during the exercise, we actually identified 2 community programs that we have housed in our department. The first that you're seeing here is the Civic Governance Inside and our Community Engagement and Job Fairs program. These are some of the programs that we use to support some of our services to our community. The next programs that we're showcasing are actually our governance programs. Overall, our department had 40 governance program. Being HR, the majority of our programs do support our internal employees. And so we are actually showcasing those programs that are being impacted by some of our FY25 change requests. Additionally, you'll see some additional governance programs that we're highlighting here. Again, with 40, we did not want to put a list before you that you kind of had to go through each individual one. During the priority-based budgeting process, we actually went through and we prioritized our programs, or we ranked our programs against our priorities. And so for the Community Engagement and Job Fairs specific program, we went ahead and did a ranking against our priorities for community investment, economic development, community safety, infrastructure, and responsible growth. The next phase that we did during the priority-based budgeting is we did a program costing. So taking our actual program and reviewing our personnel and non-personnel costs as they relate to the individual programs. So it's allowing us to take that holistic view on the services we provide and what resources we use to support those individual programs. And again, this was that example of the Community Engagement and Job Fair program. The next example that we're sharing with you here is actually one of our governance programs. This is the Employee Medical Program. And the priorities you will see for a governance program are actually workforce, fiscal sustainability, operational excellence, communication, and transparency. And so during this scoring exercise, what we did is we worked with the individual managers over those programs and really got their feedback in terms of how this program really aligns with those priorities. And so similar to our community programs, the next phase in the PBB portion was actually taking a look and costing out our program. What you'll see on this particular one, this program is simply all of our non-personnel cost associated with supporting that. So there isn't actually an FTE impact related to this program. And then a really quick glance overall for the HR department. You're seeing our community programs. Those are 2 programs, our overall cost related to those programs, and our FTE breakout. Then we're highlighting our governance programs. Those are the additional 40 programs that we have in-house. And so the cost associated or budget associated with that is the $156 million. And it does impact the 65.68 FTE. And then overall impact of what those programs look like for HR. We wanted to give you an opportunity to look at holistically for HR. Again, 99.85% of our programs are governance. We do have that small segment on the community program portion. And then another opportunity that we had through PBB was to really evaluate what we do and how that breaks out between personnel and non-personnel costs. So HR actually encompasses 4 funding sources. And so being able to evaluate our services across all of those funding sources and really see the impact and breakout between personnel and non-personnel cost. So some of our takeaways for priority-based budgeting. I would say that overall, we had the opportunity to step away from the yearly adjustments to our line items and truly review the services and programs HR supports. Take that step back and evaluate what are we reaching, how are we actually aligned to city priorities. And so we feel that it allowed us, you know, kind of that breakaway from just increasing, decreasing line items or contracts. And it really allowed us to tie into our 25 goals, right? So some of the things that we're focusing on largely for fiscal year 25 is our new Molly U learning management system, right? So that is one of our key goals for 25. We also have to support HR-related business strategies and lead change for the city to attract, retrain, and transition support of our people. So we do have some in-house HR business partners that support a lot of these programs citywide. Our third goal that we're focusing on for fiscal year 25 is our salary structure analysis and our FLSA compliance. And so that's that conversation that we kind of have ongoing. And then one of our last goals that we're really focusing on is the implementation of creative solutions for talent acquisition, right? So that recruitment aspect and how we make sure that we are recruiting that talent for the organization. And then do we have any questions?
No? How would you say the process has been for you personally in the department?
Again, it was a really good opportunity to break away from just that line item view, especially with the nuances of HR, being that we are spread across 4 funding sources, to be able to evaluate our programs holistically. As a department in HR, what are we doing? And having those in-depth conversations with the managers that support those areas. So I would say we had, it was a really good opportunity. We had a great rapport with the vendor, ResourceX. They were great support during this process.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. No other questions, council? Thank you. Back to Christian. Looks like we're shifting to fiscal year 2025 general fund revenues.
Thank you. Thank you, HR, for all of that. Hope that as I pull up my next presentation here, you can see that even though we're early in priority-based budgeting implementation, as we keep bringing departments into the fold, it's going to make the conversations around what are essential services and essential programs and where are our programs highly aligned with our priorities. Those conversations will get easier and easier to have as we continue to implement that program. So I hope through some of the foundation setting that we've done, you're able to see how those things will connect as we continue implementation of that program. Okay, yes, we're shifting gears into revenue. I'm gonna ask Brady to come up while I switch myself here. Brady Kirk, Fort Worth Lab Revenue Manager, gonna walk us through sales tax. You can stay here. That's not it, hold on. I did it on PDF. So it's gonna be weird.
Mouse rather than clicker.
It kind of works, but it's weird and scrolly. If you want to stand there, I can help fix it as we go.
Okay. All right, good morning. Well, we do really appreciate all of you being here today and your engagement on a lot of these things, some of them more interesting than others, I know. But 2 weeks ago at our last budget work session, we closed by talking about property tax and some different scenarios. And at that time, some of you around the table really smartly pointed out that we're more than just property tax. We've got lots of different revenue streams in the general fund. And so today we're going to talk to you about that, kind of give you an early look at some of our total commitments. And in particular, we're going to focus on sales tax and some of the growth we have there. And one of the first things that Mark said when we kicked this off was that all of this is really preliminary. And I'll say that again, but I just want to emphasize that it was only last week that we officially heard from all the departments what their requests are for the new year. And as we were finishing that up, one of our city colleagues who's not in budget, told me that, well, now your real work on the budget starts. And I think the only reason he said it was because it made him happy to remind me that some of us have a summer of budget work coming up, and he doesn't. But nonetheless, he was right. We're just right now starting to get all the pieces that are going to make up the picture of next year's budget. Oh, gosh. All right, there we go. Thank you. So here we've got a history for you over about the last decade of what sales tax has looked like in the general fund. And I think the best thing to call attention to right away is you look at it, how it's gone up and down. Every single year, even in 2020, we have seen an increase in sales tax over this period. And in about at least 35 years of history that I've got, there's only been a few times, I think only 3 years, when we've ever seen a decrease, and that was during major nationwide recessionary periods. Now, a frequent trend is that we've pretty often done just a little bit better in actuals than we thought we would going into the year. Now, in COVID, it kind of threw that off. You look at everything after 2020, and it's kind of your classic, fool me once, shame on the pandemic. Fool me 5 years in a row, then I don't know. Because in 2020, we never expected a drop-off like that. And so it was still up, but it was down compared to our budget. And then the next few years, nobody expected the recovery to be that strong. So you can see the orange bars there above the blue bars. We were doing really well. And then just when we tried to correct for that this year and say that we know where the growth is coming, that slowed down a little bit at the very end of 2023, pretty much after we'd already set this year's budget of $250 million. So what we're forecasting right now, based on what's come in, previous year trends, and also working with an outside economist, is that we think we're going to make $239.5 million in the general fund, which is 2.7% growth, but that's against a budget of $250 million. So we're down a little bit there. We don't hope to be there again next year. And we got one of our major forecasts coming up. We're going to look at how that affects the general fund overall. But I think really the best thing to take away is you look at the consistent growth overall. The growth this year might have even been a little bit better, if not for some circumstances I'll talk about on the next slide, but it's been pretty high, kind of a long-term average of 6% or so, 7%.
I have a quick question about the previous slide, and I'm sorry if I missed it. Is that year-to-date, or is that anticipated end of fiscal year?
Yeah, thank you. I meant to call that out. That's anticipated fiscal years. So we've collected about 175, maybe 176 so far, and we've got 3 more months that still need to come in.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, so looking at our sales tax budget, or at least our forecast for what our budget might be next year, with sales tax being the other biggest revenue source other than property tax, making up about a quarter of the general fund. We already talked about the 239.5 we think we'll get this year. And right now, the economy is not bad, but we're facing some things, just the earnings growth, the job growth. It's not as high as it's been. And one thing we keep coming back to is the nationwide interest rate environment we think is affecting a lot of things. And at least so far, we haven't seen the Fed come down on that. We think when they eventually do, maybe start offering some rate cuts, that'll make things go better, but they just had their June meeting and aren't taking it down just yet. So based on what we're seeing, and how do we forecast next year? So I mentioned it's the same as what we do intra-year. We do two different forecasts, and we work with a professional economist for that. One is based only on historical trends. One's based on all kinds of economic indicators and data from the Fed, and we also work with FMS on that. And so what we've come up with is that we think we're going to see over this year's budget about 1% growth to $252.5 million in 2025. So that 1%, that represents new funding, things that we can put towards new needs in the budget. As far as actuals, that comes out to growth of about 5.4% over that number that we're forecasting for 24. So I talked about it might have been a little bit better this year. So we always get some sort of adjustments from the state when they remit our allocation of sales tax to us. And you could call that a lot of things. It's just adjustments. It affects a lot of cities in different regions, and they're kind of reconciliations, just correcting for any small things in the past. But this year, way more than we've seen, at least in the sample period on the last slide, there's been a large negative audit adjustment. And without that, we would have been doing, so far, $1.8 million better this year. Long-term average is a small positive one, around 400,000. So that growth, which seems pretty high compared to 2.7% of 5.4, if it was just a normal year, to the extent we ever get a normal year, and we'd gotten 241.5 instead of 239.5, then we'd only be looking at 4.6% growth. So we don't think that that's crazy. We're not really betting on a huge upside. It still leaves some room for that if there's any kind of stimulus to the rate cuts or anything else. But we think right now this is a pretty reasonable number, just taking into account we still have one more month of data that needs to come in, and it's still below the long-term average as well. So with that in mind, what we're going to finish on in this portion of the presentation is a look at the general fund overall again. And before, when we came to you, we had developed a list of what some of our needs are. Now we're dealing with stuff that's a little bit more concrete, because this is based on department requests. So that makes the numbers look just slightly different than what you've seen before. And I want to say again that a lot of this can change. So we just had the budget blitz, and we have all those funding decisions to make over the next 2 to 3 months. We have one more month of sales tax to collect, which is the most important month. And then it's already been mentioned in this presentation, we get the certified values on July 25th. So that'll tell us more about what we have in terms of property tax and financing. But you saw before a number around the 46 million new expenses, the 40 million in revenue. The biggest chunk is the property tax. There's some sales tax, and I know it's too small for me to even read from here, but it'll be larger on the next slide. But there's a little bit more than just property tax. And the gap now that we're looking at in the general fund, this is our current version of our working budget, is about 7 million, that our expenses are higher than our revenues. So that's a gap to make up through either new revenue, if we get lucky, or all the normal ways that you're familiar with this time of the year. And I just want to emphasize anything that's on here, including the property tax assumption, it's not a suggestion, prediction, or recommendation, anything. We just have to put something in. We've gone with a more conservative assumption on that for now.
I had a quick question. You said there's a gap now of 7 million. And is that because of what's been presented from the department's head?
No, it's not. They've made those requests, and all of that is within that really large, kind of, to me, frightening 104 million down there. That's the decision package total. Anything that's just standard keeping business going is in the 1,060,000,000, plus EMS is in there. In the 1,060,000,000. Yes, the EMS is factored into the $7 million gap. Thank you. Okay, so then moving on to the last bit, I promised just wanted to show you a little bit about where the new revenue is coming from, sources other than property tax. And then a lot of the discussion I know throughout all the summer period, these months, it focuses on what we're going to spend it on and how we're going to use the money. But there was a moment I just thought was great towards the end of one of the department's budget blitz presentations. They had talked about some project that they did, and one of our assistant city managers asked, "How had you funded that project?" And the department director responded, "With our resources." And so we're looking at our resources too. We're putting a lot of attention into that. We have the regular meetings with the outside economists, and on some of these more minor revenue items like this, we're pushing the departments a little bit, maybe to go outside their comfort zone, just what's going to be realistic, what they can collect, so the whole burden doesn't go on a property tax and sales tax. Any questions about this list or anything else that we shared? All right. Thank you.
You know, I did have a question. On the initial first slide, I think the sales tax, what did we project last year and what did we actually bring in? I think you got the 24 projections, but what did we project for, I guess, 23? And what did we actually bring in? Do we know that?
I don't have the budget. The total collections were about 233 million. We were over budget by about, I think, 6 to 7% last year, about 7%. I don't have the budget number, but 7% below 233 million.
We brought in more or brought in less?
We brought in more last year.
Okay. That's the question.
Okay, thank
That
you.
was a good answer.
Thank you.
Nickel and dime, nickel and dime.
I have to do this annoying scrolling because I loaded the PDF, not the PowerPoint. Okay. So, Christy, you want to come to the other podium just in case you can help me? Questions. Okay, so with our remaining time, we wanted to give you really a high-level couple of slides in order to supplement sort of the much more detailed information that you have in your packet that was sent on Friday. So in a response to, and sort of a commitment to being more transparent with you early and often throughout the process, you'll note that you have a hefty packet. And so part of that packet is rate and fee changes. These are requested rate and fee changes that have been submitted through the budget process. That's a typical thing that happens in budget development. We have departments analyze their service levels and market conditions and all the different methodologies that they use. And of course, there's a whole other rate setting process for water and sewer. Stormwater has their rate. And so through the budget development process, they submit fee changes, and we have compiled those for you in your packet. And so rather than going through them all, because it's a 30-page sort of budget response, we're just showing here quickly a table on rates on the left. So proposed changes in water and sewer, these are increases that water and sewer are working through this summer. And then same with stormwater as a continued commitment for some of their capital delivery, proposing a 5% increase. And so you'll see those notes in your packet. And then on the right-hand side, these are departments that are requesting fee changes. And again, you have all of that detail in tables in your packet. We also have a lot of the departments here today if there's anything that caught your eye in your review. But typically in August and September, we bring back a lot of these details. So this is just a quick supplement to what detail you have.
Mark, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that this, in your packet, you didn't receive all the detail for all of these because they're still coming in. on the revenue side. So there's still a lot of work to be done here, but we just wanted to see the universe of what people were already talking about. By no means is any of this completed as far as a recommendation. We have to work that through the budget process on our end on the next 60 days.
That's right. Thank you.
You have a question? No? Keep going.
Okay. Okay, and then I will let Christy, I'll do scrolling on my PDF here. Christy Lemon, I want you to get used to hearing from her too with regard to budget, since she's our newest assistant director in the Fort Worth lab. Same sort of thing, a universe of decision package requests.
Good morning. So as you're aware, the process for departments to request an increase in their budget is for them to submit decision packages. So we've just received those and we packaged them up and sent them to you on Friday so you can take a look at what's in there so far. I want to emphasize that these are really preliminary, so we wanted you to see them earlier in the process. But the analysts are still vetting details and we're still working through some of those. We received about 240 proposals that included 235 new positions. And the cost of all those proposals is about $104 million. So that's kind of the universe of it. Yeah, you can go. Next slide. Yep. This shows you that 10 department requests make up about 98% of what we received. So you can kind of see what the magnitude of the request is.
These are asks on the general fund.
General fund, yes. Yeah. And then just in terms of next steps, so the analysts are working with departments to vet details, make any updates or adjustments that need to be made. We are also going to be working with the city manager's office to prioritize requests. And for those departments that have already been through priority-based budgeting, we'll be using that as an additional lens to look at those requests and see how they align with your priorities. And then referencing back to Brady's earlier conversation with you, we'll be looking at revenue at the same time to figure out what the opportunities are for funding decision packages. And then in some cases, we'll also be looking at different alternatives for addressing the needs. So for example, we might be able to reclassify a vacancy to fulfill a need without new funding or additional funding. So we'll be looking for those opportunities as well. So just wanted to kind of let you know where we are in the process and then what's coming next.
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
I got one question. And so I know some of these departments have requested these changes probably cycles before this one. In our budget process, have we included some of those into the $6 million deficit already?
The deficit that you saw on Brady's slide is representative of prior year commitments. So things that maybe they were a capital package, but now they have an operating impact and we're picking that up. And so that's prior year commitments plus EMS. That's sort of what's creating that deficit now. So maybe old decision packages that have a continued impact. But as far as repeated requests for packages, we haven't done any sort of like, hey, you've asked for this 3 times, so it's an auto include or anything like that. Yeah.
I'm just saying because I mean, I think you got here a total of 235 jobs, new positions. But reality, some of those new positions could already be included in the prior commitment to previous years. Maybe, maybe not.
No,
No,
I don't think so.
okay.
Nope, those are new. Yeah, those are just all new ads, not included in that number you saw.
Have you guys received my decision package from my office?
Not really sure. I'm not thinking. It's not sparking a memory for me.
Councilmember
The
Williams.
deadline's passed.
Well played.
Just kidding.
That was a good one. 2 questions. With respect to the fee changes, are those proposed fee changes included in the revenue that you presented earlier?
In almost all cases, yes. We're not total, I don't want to say 100%, but almost all of them came through the decision package process, so you would see them in both places.
In the sample budget that you provided for us, so that
Yes.
6 million includes additional fees?
Yes, and when you see that chart, the revenue decision package amount looks really small. That's because some departments are also asking to stop transferring revenue like from another fund to the general fund. Solid waste is a good example. So if you were to add up all the revenue decision packages, but then you would look at like individual department requests, you would see how those interplay together. But I can answer more questions on that if it gets confusing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Just kind of general reactions to the fees. I know last budget I made, I was vocal about the fees. I think it's a potential opportunity in this particular budget to look at opportunities for fees that make sense to adjust. The second question I have is regarding the decision packet. I think it's a page before this with the $100 million broken down. I'd be curious, not today, but whenever y'all can get this before, preferably August, of these requests, how many of those could be included in a bond? Because it seems like we're right on the heels of the bond. It seems like there's some things that have been deferred for quite a while. Streets in District 6, for example, there's some that may be included in this 43 million that probably, since we're right on the bond, make more sense to just be aggressive at catching up with this bond. So I'd be curious to know how many of these, I know like city secretary, city attorney, municipal court, those probably won't be included, but the larger
But of the
buckets
capital
probably make
heavy.
sense. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we are, we've taken a first pass at that, I'll say. I'm looking at Ashley as our capital person, marking some things that maybe could be like debt instrument eligible. And so we can get more detail on that. Sure.
Macy?
Just a general question, as I was flipping through this last night, there's a couple of these that spoke out to me that I know we're working through issues. I'm going to pick on a couple departments, just as examples. But so this animal shelter, y'all all know that I'm pretty passionate about making sure that we're running that as efficiently as possible and making sure that we're taking care of these animals in a humane way. So we're asking for a $755,000 increase, 9 positions. Who's responsible for making sure that the addition of the positions is in alignment with the strategy that to make sure that the shelter's operating to the highest and best quality that it is? And so just because we're throwing money at it and adding different positions doesn't mean we're getting to the right solution. So how does that process work?
It looks like Mark's turning on his button.
There we go. We'll vet it through the CMO first when we go through our budget discussions. We'll meet every week, at least twice a week, through all the way through August, middle August. And we'll be talking to the department heads about accountability around those and making sure we have confidence in that it'll actually achieve what they say it'll achieve. And sometimes they just don't get funded. If there's something that is funded, then that following year, the lab will then track it and see how we're doing. And then we started what's called Fort Worth Stat, where we meet with every department twice a year outside of the budget process to look at what packages were approved in the last year and positions, and what are your metrics, and then how are you doing? Are you doing what you say you would do? And so there's some accountability around that as well.
And one more example. So for human resources, the HR child care concierge, $150,000. Do people currently use this? Is this something we have? How do we measure success when we have resources like Child Care Associates out there that are nonprofits that can do the same thing? So I just want to make sure we're not doing duplicative work at the city when we have other nonprofit partners out there that can help supplement.
Exactly the kind of questions that we'll be asking when we review all these packages. And we'll go with these 200 plus packages, we'll do probably 24 passes. Just continue to review and whittle, and also ask those hard questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Any other questions? Charlie?
So I guess mine is going to be an ask too on some of these decision packages that they bring forward, if there's any additional revenue driver behind it. For example, commercial code may say we want an additional 20 people, but those 20 people, if out on the street, like enforcing these vacant businesses or these businesses to do the right things, that could generate additional revenue. So it's growth paying for growth in that case. So those 20 positions could actually put us in a net positive for pay for those positions plus more.
Right. So when they turn in their decision package, they're supposed to have that projection with it. So there's a net cost. But if they don't, then the lab is doing work to analyze that as well.
Okay.
In their decision package detail, if there's already a revenue offset, will they see that in the fiscal table underneath? Do you remember? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
I'll look and see. You, for those that are kind of a little more vetted, and there's that little blue table, I think that you should see a revenue offset in cases where departments have entered that. We are still working through to ensure that they have, but I'll follow up. See if it's on there.
Ellen.
So, question, Christiana or Mark, I don't know who's better to answer this, but as we're going through the budgetary process here, we have, basically 10% of what's proposed in a decision package and 90%, the other 900+ million, is just a continuation of what we've been doing. Is that right? I mean,
10%.
$1 billion budget and about 10% or 100 million in decision packages.
Oh, sure.
More or less.
Yep.
So the 90% of the money that we're spending, are we taking a hard look to really ensure that we're getting the value there? Are we touching that at all?
Yes.
As we go through this process? Can you tell me a little bit about what
Sure.
that looks like?
Up until Budget Blitz, that's primarily where all the focus has been with the departments, particularly those that are in the priority-based budgeting program, where they're looking at all the programs and every dollar and mapping that, and it's getting some scrutiny. So we're doing that. We're also, David has asked us to go back and look at all the positions that were approved in the last 2 years and see if they're filled, and if they've been partially filled for part of the year, really get a handle on, are we being effective with those positions? And then we're also looking at positions that have aged considerably in terms of not being filled for a number of years that are still carried on the books. So, and with personnel being your largest cost, that can help, especially if the department is asking for additional personnel when they still have vacancies that they haven't filled. So all of that is on the table, and we look at the baseline. We call it the baseline budget as well.
Thank you for that. The reason why I ask is, and this is not pointing at any particular project or person or anything else, is just knowing that we're looking, and if we have something that is not effective or is not, really achieving results inside of that budget, that big part of the budget bucket, how we really correct that and move forward and apply all our dollars to where they do the best good.
Any other questions or comments? No? Thank you, Christiane.
Absolutely. So to wrap us up today with our remaining 3 minutes, Mark touched on this at the beginning, but just to come full circle, the CMO team will begin working through their prioritization sort of next week, through early August, and we'll continue, of course, engaging with you, even though we don't have any work sessions scheduled until the next one, which is the recommended budget, but continue to we can do deep dives on existing programs. We can answer questions about packages that you see in your packet or maybe that you don't see in your packet. And we're also still taking public input at this stage. We don't wait until the recommended budget for that. There's the Steer the Budget campaign. There's other budget engagement activities on connectfortworth.com, some of which we previewed in here, like ranking the council priorities, using the map to say, sort of, I wish I had this service here. All those activities are live online. And then presentation of the recommended budget August 13th. And then from there, we do a whole nother round of, obviously, your input through budget work sessions and of engagement through both in-person and online engagement, activities until mid-September. And so that's sort of where we're going. Any other questions for the lab today?
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 questions. One, I'm really glad we're doing the community engagement in the way that we're doing. Can you all provide us regular updates of that leading up to August 13th? That way we can keep track of what the public is saying as we are thinking through these things.
Yes.
And then the second thing, it kind of relates to this, but how are y'all planning to use the summary and themes from the Council 101? It's really helpful, and it's kind of condensed in terms of the priorities that are there. How are y'all planning to integrate that into this budget process?
That was my first attempt at compiling those notes from our one-on-ones to look for patterns. And then in my first pass, I sort of bumped it up against a submitted decision package list to say like, okay, we've covered a lot of this, or where are the gaps? And so I think we'll use them in our city management deliberations too, to ensure that we're covering the big patterns and themes against the priorities. Mark, do you have any other thoughts on those?
No, you covered it.
Okay, great.
One last question. Is this shared with the public too? I think it's good for the public to see kind of what.
I don't know if that was included in the packet. I'll find out.
It's
The
helpful.
notes. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions, council? No? Thank y'all very much. Very productive.
Thank you.
Council, we're going to adjourn here and then move into executive session. The city council will now convene into executive session on the following matters. The city council will conduct a closed meeting in order to seek the advice of its attorneys as authorized by section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code.